I'm Thomas. I'm a third year astrophysics student studying at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. And this is 2020. We're doing a lot of stuff online. So today I'm going to talk a bit about what apps I use in my degree. Because we do everything on computers now. Everything from socialising to communicating to classes. So in today's video I'm going to talk about the apps that I use, and they're going to be split up into 4 different categories. First, I'm going to talk about the apps that I use for organisation, keeping myself organised while at university. Then the ones I use for communication, since it's 2020 and we can't really just wander into the physics building and ask for help or meet up with some friends. Then I'm going to talk about what apps I use for producing different types of work, because there are a few different types of things I have to do as an astrophysics student, and they require different things. And then there's just going to be a couple of apps at the end that I just find useful. They're not specifically study apps or anything, they're just very useful for me as a student. They help. So first, organisation. And there's really only one app that really keeps me organised, and that is Notion. Notion is a productivity app, and there are countless different videos across YouTube from a variety of creators that use Notion. Off the top of my head, the ones that come to mind of people that use Notion, you've got Simon Clark, you've got Ali Abdaal, you've got Sarah Dietschy. I'll put a couple of videos in the top right hand corner from Simon Clark and Ali Abdaal who can explain this far better than I can in a short video. Notion kind of needs its own video because it's a very customizable program. You essentially start with a blank slate and can fill it up with whatever you need to be most productive. I've been using it since about April or May, and it's gone through about 7 or 8 different iterations at this point. It's hard to explain it succinctly because everyone uses it in a different way. There's a couple other things I use for organisation. My university uses Microsoft Teams, which has a calendar function which flags up any meetings that I have. But that's not so much an app that I use specifically for organisation. So, moving on to communication. Now, communication in 2020 is almost entirely electronic. With the current coronavirus restrictions going up and down and up and down all of the time at the minute, you kind of have to rely on online communications. Now, there are a few that I use. I've already mentioned Microsoft Teams, and it's the platform of choice for St Andrews University. There are some universities who will use the various like Google Classroom offerings. I think that does a video. Some people will use Zoom. There are options, but my university uses Microsoft Teams because we have a lot of stuff with the Microsoft ecosystem. Now, most of my tutorials at the start of the year were on Teams because we still weren't allowed to have any in-person teaching. Since about the 3rd or 4th week of term, we've had some in-person teaching. But one of my modules, Transferable Skills, we had our tutorials online the entire time. It's different from Zoom, but some of the things it adds are really good, and there are a couple of things that it misses out that I kind of wish it had. The video aspect is actually probably better on Zoom, but the organisation aspect and making sure people have meetings and invitations that come through correctly and people come to them works far better in Teams. And you also got sort of chat functions. You can ask questions of a lecturer in the team for that module. It's actually quite good. Then there's email. We still use email a lot at university. Academia just kind of runs on it, and it's fine. I personally just use the Windows 10 Mail app. There are many options. People are probably judging me a lot right now for saying I use the Windows 10 Mail app. There are so many different email applications. Basically, I use email quite a lot for communicating, but not for messaging my friends. For messaging my friends, that's a combination of Facebook Messenger and Discord. Discord is segregated into servers. You can create your own servers. And Facebook, it's your Facebook friends list. What more is there to say? Okay, so having covered organisation and communication, now let's talk about producing work. Now, there are a few different types of work I have to do as an astrophysicist. Obviously we have lectures, and I have to take notes for those. We have computational work. Some physicists will have experimental work. Now, I'm not going to talk about experimental stuff because I don't do that anymore, but let's talk about note-taking. Now, the way that I've taken notes has actually varied quite a lot in the last 3 years. I started off taking notes on paper, like most people, and I wrote down pretty much everything the lecturer said. Everyone did in first year. But since then I've improved a bit. I stopped using paper at the start of 2020, not the start of this academic year, so last semester. And I started taking notes on this, a tablet. Now the apps that I've used on the tablet have changed. When I started off I was using Microsoft OneNote, which is a fine program, just at the time didn't have brilliant support for Android. Now, since I don't use OneNote any longer, although I might go back to it when I upgrade my tablet, I use Wacom's Bamboo Paper app. And it's quite good. Its pen support is pretty good on Android. And yeah, my handwriting is terrible, but I think that's largely due to the handwriting not being brilliant on this tablet. I'm planning to upgrade to a Samsung, which supposedly has far better handwriting support. I did think about buying an iPad, but it's an extra £100 to get the pen, whereas the Samsung has it included and everything else I have is Android or Windows. It doesn't make much sense for me to buy into the Apple ecosystem. Now, I've talked about Notion for organisation, but for some things I also use it for notes. On this channel, I've talked a little bit about a module called Transferable Skills for Physicists. Now, Transferable Skills for Physicists is kind of a here, learn how to do presentations and scientific writing and kind of like learn how to function in society is the way that I think about it. More than just what we do in our normal physics modules, which is learn the physics and answer problems on it and maybe do a couple of lab reports. Now for this module, I've had to write a review article on star formation around the galactic centre, as well as giving a talk on the Cassini-Huygens mission to Titan. Both of these projects were quite broad and involved a lot of scientific research, looking through different papers and different other sources, such as textbooks, and compiling all the information and delivering it in a way that is easy to read or listen to and engaging. And keeping track of all that data was kind of difficult. So I kept track of that stuff in Notion, taking notes on it. But speaking of reports, this is the other type of work that we have to do as astrophysics students. Now, there are a few different apps that I use for this. In fact, this is probably going to be the longest section in terms of sheer number of apps. First, if I'm doing any sort of writing for a project, submitting an article or that sort of thing, I will use a language called LaTeX. Now, LaTeX was created by the American Mathematical Society, and it's essentially the way that all scientific papers, largely speaking, are written. You write LaTeX in a program and then use a compiler to create the document, normally as a PDF. Now, the program that I use is called Atom. Atom is an editor that can do pretty much any programming language you want. Currently, I use it for LaTeX, but I'm planning to set it up to use with Python, and assuming it works, maybe Fortran? I don't know. I don't know enough about Fortran 90 yet. We're doing a module in that next semester. What I do currently use Python in is something called a Jupyter Notebook. It's something I'm not a massive fan of, but it's what we're made to use. I've just finished writing an astrophysics project for extragalactic astronomy, like literally an hour ago, and yeah, it's a really interesting way of writing. The code is segregated up into cells and you can insert markdown cells that are more text-based. I get why they make us use it for these things, because you can submit it as one file rather than your Python code and a write-up. It makes it easier to mark, but I would prefer Python code and a write-up. Another editor I've used for Python is called Spider. It's something that works quite well. It doesn't take a lot of effort to set up. It's probably what I would go to if I was needing to use something in a hurry and I hadn't set up Atom yet, which I haven't. Downloading papers from the internet, you get a lot of PDFs. And there are two ways you can look at them. First is to use a PDF viewer. I use either Adobe Acrobat or Nitro PDF. Normally Nitro because it's free with my university, I get the pro version. The other way that I deal with PDFs is using a program called Mendeley. Now Mendeley is a PDF manager. Essentially, you can import all of your papers that you need to use and you can separate them out by the project that you're working on. For example, like Galactic Centre Star Formation. And one of the best things that this program does is it integrates with something called BibTeX. It works with LaTeX to create your bibliography without having to manually cite everything. It's brilliant, and it will order them alphabetically or in numerical order or whatever style you need in LaTeX. Honestly, saved me hours of work. But sometimes I don't want to be using LaTeX and Python, I just need to write up something very quickly. For that, I'll use the Microsoft Office suite, like most people on the planet. Although there are options. You can use LibreOffice if you're on Linux, or I don't know, maybe there's a Windows version. You can use Google's suite of things like Google Docs, Google Slides, or you can use whatever Apple's one is. I don't know, is it like Pages and stuff? But what I use is the Microsoft Office suite, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel. And the other ones that I don't really use. You're probably familiar with these programs. They just kind of work. Most people have something that can open a docx file or something. It's fast, it's easy, you send them an email and it works. PowerPoint though is quite good. It's pretty much the best for doing presentations as far as I can tell. At least doing them quickly and not having to deal with weird formatting. It's like the only place where formatting on Microsoft seems to work. And that brings us finally on the producing work to handing in tutorial questions and exam papers. Obviously, this year we're not having in-person exams, and they don't really want us handing in tutorial work because if one person has COVID, they do some coughing while they're doing the tutorial sheet, they hand it in, oh, oops, tutor got COVID. Not great. So what we've been doing is electronic submission. Now, my university, St Andrews, suggests we use a program called Office Lens. It's a Microsoft program, and it works fine, but I don't use it. Instead, I betray my St Andrews heritage and use Oxford Campus notebooks, and they have these little icons. And what that means is when you use the Scribsy app, it finds those icons. And once it's found those, it can scan it, and it just scans it in, and there's no adjusting the edges of your page to make them appear to be in the right place. It just kind of works. I can email it to myself, and I just find it to be less hassle. Also, it's really nice paper to write on. It's like not too expensive, it's not the cheapest you can get, but I quite like writing on it, and given I use fountain pens, it's nice to have slightly thicker paper so it doesn't bleed through. And that brings us on to my sort of final section. It's very short. It's just the other useful programs that I find help me as a student. First is OneDrive. Now I tend to use OneDrive or Google Drive. There are other options, Dropbox, that sort of thing. There are many available cloud storage features. Now normally I would use a USB stick to transfer stuff. It's just a little easier for me, but it is good to have a backup of important things like a project you just finished working on. It's nice to have that online. And the final one is not really study related at all, but I use it almost all the time when I am studying, and that's Spotify. I like music. It helps. I find it helps. In fact, I might put a link to my playlists in the description below, the ones that I use when I'm studying. So, that's the apps that I use when I'm doing work for my astrophysics degree. If there are some of these that you use and really like, please let me know in the comments below. If there are some that you think I should be using, put them in the comment section below as well. In the meantime though, go and check out the videos on Notion from Simon Clark and Ali Abdal. They'll be in the top right hand corner, probably. And if you're looking for something else from me, then go and check out my video on why you shouldn't come to St Andrews University. In the meantime though, please like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.